in, Argentina. And if you're doing global jewelry, there's lots of opportunity to teach that there Jews live all over the world. You can look at statistics. Rabbi Larry Milder, he composed the song wherever he could never have imagined. He and I are friends. He could never have imagined, wherever you go, there's always someone Jewish. From a camp song would have taken off the way it has. But that's absolutely true. What our challenge is today is to talk about how do we help our children, our kids, the next generation, and generations to come feel this connection to Israel. I am what I call a liberal Zionist. I don't believe Israel's perfect. I don't believe America's perfect. I'm sitting right now in Canada. Actually, this is like the Jerusalem campus of HUC, but in my whatever you call it background. But the reality that we are connected to Israel is for me is indisputable, right? When I'm teaching older kids or adults, I take out the poem by Yehuda Levi, 11th century, and I say, we read through the poem. I can't eat. I'm here in chains. I look to the east. I can't even taste my food. He's bereft. And it wasn't a difficult time for Jews at the time where he was living in Spain, but he felt this inextricable connection to Israel, unbelievable that he literally describes, I can't taste my food. The man had never set foot in Israel. So how does he have this connection? And I ask, older students, like, how, and you could certainly introduce this to 4th and 5th and 6th graders. How is it that he has this connection? If you're Jewish and you're, an observant Jew from that era and a man, you prayed 3 times a day. You heard the Torah 3 times a week. You included Israel when you did the Birkat Hamazon. Israel's a huge part of our liturgy. It's part of our Torah. It's part of our story, not just in ancient times, but even today. We have this connection to Israel, and that to me is indisputable. How we feel about the connection and how we feel about everything that happens in Israel, that's up for grabs. But we are connected. And I think that's what I'm trying to exemplify in this workshop. How do we get in sort of not teaching the subject of Israel, but teaching Israel in all the subjects we teach? So I'm going to share my screen. I am going to share my screen. Let's see. Yeah. Oops. Somehow it's going to launch this meeting. I don't want to relaunch the meeting. Actually, my PowerPoint stopped. So let me click on that for a second. I know I'm living the dream, right? This challenge of what we have to do to share with our students. And then I lost my share. Okay. This worked perfectly last time, even though we were in a rush. Let me go back to here. Sorry, folks. All right. Well, I'm going to share it in non-presenter mode, so you'll understand. You've been there, and I'm sure done that. Let's see if does it still? No, it's not going to show. Don't worry about it. Don't look ahead. No, but you can look at my notes. So, as I say, I'm committed to helping sort of see the view of whatever subject they're studying, students are studying, or what you're teaching, to see that the whole picture of what it means to be Jewish includes being connected to Israel, and therefore you can say back to what Kelly was saying earlier on, that that we have a positive connection insofar as it's included in what we do. I was telling the earlier group that in part of the sweep that I did for Introduction to Judaism Online, which is the program I run at the for the Reform Movement, we did a very big sweep last year of, or now 2 years ago, for to ensure that we represent Jewish people and Jewish life cycle and Jewish observance as being a plurality of people. We're no longer just, male, female, husband, wife, and 2 children who are white lighting the Shabbat candles. We have to really be conscious about how we represent ourselves, because we are represented by such a plurality of human faces and relationships. And so in the same way, I think we need to do a sweep of all of our curriculum to make sure that somehow we represent Israel in all that we do, so that our children feel that they're connected to Israel, even if it's in a passive way, a non kind of deliberate this is the subject Israel, but that we can do it in some ways passively. So I'm going to share with you a number of resources and how I use them, and you're going to receive all of the material and the links. You don't have to take notes. You can just enjoy, hopefully, and listen. So I'm taking a stab at what it is I think you are likely teaching. You're welcome to unmute and say, but I teach something different, and you can. Um, some of us in the earlier grades are teaching life cycle. Many of us are teaching holidays as they come up. Some of us are teaching Bible stories or matriarchs and patriarchs. Some are teaching Sidur and Tfilot. And here's just some images that I grabbed online that I think represent, they're all images from Israel, that represent what we could be teaching. You might be teaching midot or values. I think at some point we're all teaching some sort of midot or mitzvot, which are commandments, but values. And then finally, you could be teaching synagogue. I know lots of the grades or the schools at some point have in a grade the synagogue, and you go and tour the synagogue and you talk to the rabbi and you talk to the cantor if you have one, and you talk to the executive director and the but you don't have to show an image of your synagogue. They get to see that. Showing, just dropping it in passively and saying, oh, and this is a synagogue in, and wherever it is that you found it. This one is in, I can't remember where I grabbed that image from, but I know there's a female rabbi there because she's a colleague of mine. All right. So if you're teaching life cycle, imagine if instead of, again, teaching just images through images, I should say, of people who are in America, which is very familiar to them. They get to see it. Most kids, when they get to religious school, have been a guest at a bar or bat mitzvah, have known about their uncle or aunt or two aunts getting married or so forth. So you can show images then. Feel free to show images of Israel and tell them, oh, well, this is a beautiful wedding on the shores of Tel Aviv Yafo where a couple is getting married. And you don't have to teach about a wedding in Israel. You just have to show them images so it becomes more and more familiar to them. Again, here's a bar mitzvah, two female officiants here at the wall, probably at the arch that's around the corner from the wall, and this is a student who's able to open the Torah and be able to chant. It's not on Shabbat; it's because they're wearing tefillin, but it's probably on a Monday or a Thursday. But just familiarizing them with images of Israel helps them to see that the same life cycle that's happening in their synagogues right here in America is happening also in Israel. Remembering that for a huge portion of our Jewish community, our global Jewish community, part of the life cycle is when you turn 18, you do national service or you do you serve in the IDF, and showing images again that normalize women as part of the IDF, or people with special needs, with distinct abilities, who are part of national service. So Israel's really championed for disability rights, and long before we had it, ACRI existed as rights for people with disabilities, and you'll get resources to click on all of these sites. You'll find people who are Down syndrome who are serving in the national service. You have people here who are visually impaired. There's a role for everybody. And I'm not going to say it's perfect or it's easy, but it's there. And I think that's something that our students would be valuable for them to see, whether it is you're teaching about life cycle and you want to include that part of the life cycle of a Jew in Israel, that's what 7 million of us, or part of the life cycle of part of midot or values in the Jewish community at large is inclusion, and how do we see inclusion taking place here? So anyone want to add anything or from your own experiences or questions? I'm going to keep going then. All right. So I personally think that kids today don't know much about getting mail, receiving mail, but I know they love it when it happens. An aunt and an uncle might, or grandparent might send something in the mail, a card. I think about the ways that we can use postcards, and I'll give you the resources for where I find postcards. But the way you could use postcards to either send to your students, have your students send between each other, just even show by example the origins of, let's say, I picked it just out of a hat, Tu B'Shvat, that it all started in Israel, and you were teaching the holiday of Tu B'Shvat. Why not send them a postcard and say, Tu B'Shvat Sameach, happy Tu B'Shvat, and connecting them to Israel through sort of the idea of mail that it's come all of these years is very, all of these miles is very, both romantic and kind of exotic, right? If you look at, I'm not sure why I can't, let me stop sharing for just a second. I'm going to see if I can't make this happen. Nope, sorry. Because I need you to see this a little bit larger. For how many people has this happened? This happens for me, and when I'm teaching for my students intro online, every now and then it just doesn't cooperate. I'm used to 2 screens, but I'm in Canada and I'm only using my laptop. Oh well. All right, sorry folks. So I'll go back to sharing the way I was. It's hard, it's difficult to see, but if you did see the back side of the postcard, the writing part of it, you'll see it's Hebrew, English, and Arabic, which are the languages in Israel. I think even again, exposing kids, not necessarily teaching them, but exposing them to those 3 languages as part of our, of Israel, our holy land, or Israel belonging to all of us, is something that's important. This is funny because that's postcard image that I took of the backside. The writing side says for domestic use only. I don't think you can read it; it's so small. But you don't have to worry about that. This is just an old postcard. Where can you find postcards if you want to use them? Again, passively or actively connecting students to Israel. You can find them in these places. The government's national photo collection is available to all of us. I don't know how many, hundreds of thousands of photos. I don't know it's millions yet, but hundreds of thousands of photos that the National Archives and National Photo Collection makes available to us for free. So it's a website that you go on, and I'm going to share all of that with you. Don't worry about it. And you could go in, and no matter what subject you're teaching, it could be about Israel. You're talking about the era of, Golda Meir. You can put in the word Golda Meir, the words Golda, the name, and you'll have tens of thousands of photos you could use that are free for your use. But you could also put in postcards. You could also put in Tu B'Shvat. You could also put in Sukkot. And all those images will come up, and you could choose what it is you want to use, whether it's a photograph or a postcard. You can also find postcards that you can cut and paste or download or purchase for very little amount of money on Zazzle, on eBay, and Etsy if you want to do something with postcards that way. And then if you also, last workshop, or the last group that was with me, I mentioned, there's someone I knew who's an educator and who goes back and forth to Israel a lot with her husband. I was like, you could just ask Nancy and say, got any postcards of Israel? And use those images, scan them or screenshot them, and then use those images just as a passive way of saying happy holidays, but using a photo or a postcard of Israel. Similar to the National Photo Archives, the National Philatelic Society in Israel, Israel's stamp society, if you will, makes every single published stamp available to us. And so these are just my going on to the, I'll show you the site, Philatelic Society, and saying if you were to teach the matriarchs and patriarchs, biblical stories, instead of the images that we have in some of our textbooks, which I find some of them to be really problematic in that they show everybody as being very white. They show our ancestors as being, having very, normative appearances like we are today, which is probably unlikely. I love the idea of taking, stamp as an example of a story from our past. And so if you're teaching Bible stories, you can get you just have to put in the words, and the Philatelic Society also has a search tool in English. You could do English or Hebrew. And in English, you can put in matriarchs, patriarchs, and you could put in, and then these are the stamps that came up. And I think they're both beautiful. They tell a story, each stamp. And it's just, they're beautiful images that you could use instead of using our textbook images. You could share with your students, and it passively teaches that Israel produces stamps that have to do with our people and our people's story. There's some other things that they will learn if you want to point it out. There's Hebrew, English, and Arabic. Yet again, there's the story. There's the idea that the characters in the stamps themselves, look like they're from the Middle East. I don't know that you have to point that out to students, but I think it's important for them to see that it's not always that the images aren't always the way that we learned images, certainly myself and my generation, always, heteronormative, always Ashkenormative, and always white. So that's just a way you can use postage stamps to tell the story. You can also put in holidays. You could put in any holiday, any life cycle, any Bible story. You could probably put in Siddur, and you will come up with images that from the Philatelic Society that could just be something you could use that's a little bit different and that connects our students passively to Israel. Here's a book that I purchased. I purchased it used when I was working at Center for Israel Education, and it's called The Jewish World in Stamps, obviously, and it really tells, it's all over the world. It's not just Israeli stamps, but it's a wonderful way. Kids are really enthusiastic and love to be taught by things that are like a little bit different. And there's the link. I'll share that with you later. You can have this PowerPoint as well as my notes. Anyone want to take a guess at what this is? Any stabs? You could all unmute. We're a small enough group that you can totally unmute. I know because the letters all run together, it's a little hard to see, but it says the Beit HaTkiya. Now, when do we hear the word Tkiya? Well, when might our students hear the word Tkiya?
Rosh Hashanah?
There's no test at the end at Rosh Hashanah. Thank you, Jacqueline. You're brave. You don't need to be brave to be here. But of course, we hear it at Rosh Hashanah. It was funny because the last group, when I said, when might we hear this? And someone said, when they went to war. She was thinking right away, Israel history, that they blew the shofar when they were at the front lines of the war and it was time to strike. But I would like our students to know that, and they would be familiar. When do you hear Tekiah? If you said that, I think with the little melodic addition, they would know, oh, the high holidays, exactly. So this is a parapet that, this was over like a archway on the way to the ancient temple, and they date this, they're not exactly sure, but it's the Herodian period, it's the 1st century before the Common Era, and this really connects us to the idea that we've been saying Tekiah for a really long time. So instead of showing a picture of a man in payas blowing a shofar, or even a man or a woman or a bar mitzvah kid, here in America blowing the shofar, showing them something like this, again, passively connects them to this thing has been going on for a really long time. And in ancient days, before the destruction of the Second Temple, there were musical instruments and choirs, by the way, that included men and women, who sang in the ancient temples. And we blew the shofar all the time on Shabbat to announce Shabbat and so forth. So the taking an image like this, and this comes from I want to say from the archives of the Israel Museum, and I can, again, this will all be shared with you. You don't have to write it down, but you can get images for all sorts of different things, irrespective of what you're teaching, to include Israel in your teaching. I'm going to actually skip the next slide and move on to the one after that and show you if you're teaching about Siddur or the Aleph Bet, starting with an image like this, just showing that in Israel, street art is totally legitimate. It's a form of art. It's a form of expression. And I didn't tell this story last time, but there was a time, and it probably was like 6 or 7 years ago, where they were a lot of street artists were painting the steel doors in the shuk, and they were, in some cases, connected to the person who owned that stall in the shuk, but in some cases were not, and it became such a admirable and cool thing that some of the shop owners, the stall owners, were kind of like, how come no one did this to me in the middle of the night? Like, I want it. It was like became very popular and very acceptable. And now street art in Israel is a form of art. It's a form of expression. And I think it's an opportunity. I'll give you a number of sites where you can look for images. You can also just Google. And whether it's you're teaching the alphabet, or whether you're teaching Siddur, or whether you're teaching art, whatever it is you're teaching, I think you can use street art. I use this next one. If I were teaching Shema, the liturgy of Shema, listen, you have this artist, Sarah Arenthal, sorry, who left her ultra-Orthodox community when her marriage was set up. You don't have to talk about that, but I thought you'd be interested. When she was 17, she, through a society in Israel, a charitable organization, um, kind of got out of that community, was accepted into another community, studied art, and became a street artist. And this is on a wall. It's hard to see that it is a wall because it looks so perfect. But it is on a wall, and she lives in Brooklyn. She's Brooklyn based, but she spends a lot of time in Israel. And this is in Tel Aviv. And I thought this would be like, if I were teaching Shema, I'd want to use this art. And then again, through the back door, say, this happens to be street art in Israel. This is like graffiti, but it's totally acceptable there. And I want to think, what do you think the artist was thinking when she wrote down, listen, and you can have her out of the image. You can find the image by itself. Listen carefully. What does it mean? What does it mean that that her characters don't have ears, but that their mouths are red, the only colors? But look how big their eyes are. Do you need your eyes to listen? And you can have these conversations about, what does Shema really mean, as you're decoding and as you're learning Shema and what it means for the Jewish people, using a piece of Israel street art and connecting them in a kind of, again, kind of once upon a time subversive, but now completely acceptable way of expressing yourself in Israel, really brings them to modern Israel. Right from that slide with the ancient Israel, Tikiyah, Beit Tikiyah, and to this street art that is now very common in Israel and very popular. I think helps them understand that we've had this huge trajectory and connection to the Holy Land as a Jewish people for a very long time. I included this piece of street art because I think I mentioned before, it reminds me of like a unicorn and a whale. If you're teaching Jonah and the Whale, Michal Rubin's very popular, very colorful street art and tattooing, by the way. She's a tattoo artist as well. She has this image. You can see it's on the side of a wall. That's a pretty big tree, and it's a pretty big piece of art, and she drew that, and it's completely acceptable. She even signs it. She tags, most street artists tag themselves, and she has a simple MR. Why is it in English? I'm not entirely sure. Michal Rubin's Israeli, but I love this image. And if you want to, if you're teaching the Bible story of Jonah and the whale, what a great way to introduce something that isn't necessarily what they might expect, a piece of street art. So that's how I might use street art if I'm teaching biblical stories, or at the high holidays about Jonah and the whale. Maybe even have them try to recreate something and imagine what it's like to put a little person in there, and what it was like. What was it? Is the story as colorful and imaginative as this piece of art? All right. If you're teaching midot, and I think all of us, whether it's actively or passively, teach midot, teach values to our students, I suggest that you take pieces, photographs and examples, not just from our own places where kids are connected with what it means to have values, to when you take, here in America, here in Atlanta, but to, again, you have an opportunity to connect to Israel. And there are, I think at last count, something like 33,000 NGOs, 33,000 non-government organizations that are charitable-based organizations that help people. And again, I'm going to give you a list of many of them, and also a list of where to find the list in the handout. Here's something that I know kids feel very connected to. The SPCA, or any kind of animal protection, animal care. And I loved the quote that I found on this, and this is Israel. This could be down the street in the park that they all connect to, or that they all walk their dogs in. A pet is a family. I should say family member. It's, loose translation from the Hebrew. A pet is a family, and we take care of the whole family. normalizing Israel, just like, they have dogs and cats as pets and fish and whatever. And it's very important that we take care of them. You could talk about the midah or that comes Talmudically, that you have to feed your animals before you yourself sit down to your meal, because they rely entirely on you. So that's a midah that I think that kids would really love and connect to, and then can unpack. Also, yeah, I mean, enough about that. But you can find these images for kids to see that Israel's modern, it's normal, it looks just like we look. And if you're drawing a family tree, which I know a lot of us do in the very early grades, we do the family tree maybe of a biblical characters, and we do our own family tree. That in this quote, this on the SPCA from Israel. This is, I think, in Ranana. I can't remember exactly, but one of the communities that they have on their site, that a pet is family. So do we include our pets on our family trees? Why not? It teaches that. I thought about, for the first day of classes next year, or maybe even when you're back now, being inclusive means speaking the language and being understood by all the people in our classroom. So if I were going to be teaching one of the early grades, I might put something like this kind of slide up if I'm doing virtually, or to have a picture of that for our kids and say, I want to share with you what it means to me to be inclusive, and to make sure that everybody here is respected as understanding how we're going to learn, whatever the subject is, how we're going to learn. I want to make sure I'm speaking your language. And I use this as an example. This is one of my favorite streets in Israel. You can make it up. Derech Beit Lechem. But, to be inclusive, we have to make sure that we include the Hebrew for people who speak Hebrew, the Arabic for people who are speaking Arabic and read Arabic, and the English for people who are English. And in some places you'll see Russian and other languages as well. But I think it really speaks loudly about Israel's desire and intent to be inclusive, and our own how we can connect to that, again, not necessarily teaching about Israel, but teaching about who we are through an image of Israel, and normalizing Israel, and admiring aspects of Israel. I'll switch to another slide, which I grabbed off online. I wanted to put in human rights. We wouldn't have a human rights march in America, in Canada, in Israel, in South Africa, if everything were perfect. And so this is both an example to me, again, of inclusion, human rights march. You've got young people and old people, and um, uh, you know, people who have English signs. You can't see it off. It's in black, and then people who have Hebrew signs. A sign of women, men, and non-binary people, a gay flag, and I think this shows that if everything were perfect, we wouldn't have to have these marches, but we have these marches, that Israel has a freedom of speech in the same way, and expression, and the right to assemble in the same way that we do have here. Let me see, are we out of time? It goes very quickly. Do we have to go back, Susan?
Ellen, you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay.
2 minutes.
So in 2 minutes, I'm going to share with you, no, I'm not going to share with you. I'm going to have you just say your ideas. At the end of the day, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'Zeh, this Talmudic teaching, which tells us that part of the teaching that we do has to respect and hold up and lift up the idea that all of Israel is responsible for one another. All of Am Yisrael, all of the people, the Jewish people, are responsible for one another. And you can't be responsible for one another if you don't feel a sense of connection. So you can look up global Jewry or world Jewry. I once did a curriculum for Jews around the world. There are Jews everywhere, just like Larry Milder said. Wherever you go, there's always someone Jewish. But that inextricable connection we have to Israel is something that we want to make sure that our children feel, because the more they feel it, the more they know about it, the more it's familiar, the more it's old, new, and everything in between. I think the more likely they are to hold on to this connection and pass that on to the next generation themselves. We can't skip anybody. So any questions? Again, you're going to receive, you can have the PowerPoint, you can have all the notes, you can have all the links that I include in the handout to find these things, the postcards, the stamps, etc. Anyone want to add anything? I know I was like doing what you should never do, which is not have breakouts and some sort of game for you to play, but 35 minutes, I didn't know how to share everything. What do people teach real quick?
I would just like to say thank you for the idea of putting Israel ideas, not when you're just teaching Israel, but in everything, you know, using it as a sample photo for anything, just so they get used to, excuse me, the visuals.
Right. The images are very, very powerful. So the same way that in DEI, we make sure we don't just show people who are able and people who are able in every way and who are white and who are, you know, heteronormative. We make sure that we represent everyone. If children can't see themselves, if students can't see themselves in their own situations, like that SPCA, if they can't see themselves somewhere, they can't feel a sense of connection or belonging. If we want our kids to feel like they belong to Israel. You know, so I was a really big proponent, this may shock you, proponent for getting rid of in Camp Coleman, Yom Yisrael. If we pour all of our energy into Yom Yisrael and do Israel on one day, what does that say about the rest of camp? We have this opportunity of immersive environment for 3.5 or 4 weeks, 8 weeks in some cases with kids who stay 2 sessions. We have this opportunity to do Israel every day. Whatever it is we do, connect them to Israel. So that whether it's swimming or rock climbing or whatever it is, I don't like just like focusing on, in the same way I don't like IDF night, like, you know, just focusing on Israel's all about war. But Yom Yisrael, we reserve it for one day. No, Israel's a part of every day. And the more we connect to it, and so that for that, I'm so grateful for all the Mishlachat, the shlichim who come from Israel and come to camp. They make it so amazing because they're in swimming and they're in bike riding and they're in drumming and whatever, art. We need to feel that sense of connection to Israel, and we need to exemplify it if we want, and not just reserve it for one day, Yom Ha'atzmaut or Yom Yisrael, to make sure that our students feel connected. And we can do it. I think we can. The more we do it passively, the more naturally they'll feel a sense of connection. Please, if you have any specific questions or you want specific help, I'm available. My email is Rabbi Ellen, just how it sounds, at Gmail. I got that, Gmail. So you're welcome to email me and say, hey, I teach 3rd grade, whatever it is, and I'd love to, you know, where can I find, and you're going to get the links anyway, but I'm happy to help you individually if you send me an email. So thanks.
Thank you so
I really
much.
appreciate it. Thank you for being patient with my very like head, you know, whatever it's called, you know, talking head presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ellen. And thank you all for joining us. I thought it was so much information, so much really useful information. And on the registration page for this program where you all picked your Zoom sessions, we're going to list all the resources from all the breakout sessions. So not just the 2 you were able to go to, but the other 4. And so you'll have all this information at your fingertips. And now we're going to go back for the last 20 minutes to the main room. I've posted it in the chat, the Zoom link, so you have it. And we'll wrap up. We'll do some closing and everyone have a little bit of a chance to share. And I thank you all so much for joining us.